This is the Real Good Procast with your hosts, Declan DeBarb, Ian Blumenthal, and Marshall Heath.
Welcome, everybody, to the Real Good Procast. My name is Declan DeBarb. To my right, we have Marshall Healy back in action, back right in time for playoff preview. And to my left, a familiar face for some of you, we have Mike Gould. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. How you doing, boys?
Just fine. I'm great. How are you?
I'm all right. Marshall?
Better after last night, but we can get to that later.
Now, basically how I wanted to break this one down today, guys, is I want to take a look at each series. I know that there's been a lot of news. Coach Q just signed in Florida, big signing for them. A couple of other things. The Slavovoinov news broke today. But basically, I just want to focus on the playoffs in this one. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk head-to-head records, offense, defense, and then a player to watch for each team. I think it should be a good time. Now, I think we should start with the most competitive series, Toronto-Boston, not just the fact that I am a Toronto fan. I think this one is pretty contentious if you've been watching sports over the past, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Do you have bad flashbacks to up by 3?
Well, I was talking with a couple of friends today in class, and they were like, "You wore the jersey. Now we have to make fun of you." And I was like, don't bring up Game 7.
Understandable.
Cried. One of the worst memories. Like, I went that night. I had actually gone downtown to watch the game at Maple Leaf Square, and it's one of the only
number one.
One of the only times I've cried in public.
Wow.
I cried the whole ride back, and
Wow.
it's a lengthy ride from my house.
You say one of only, like there's more.
Well, there's
Yeah.
been a couple, but
Okay. Well, we can get into that later, too.
But basically how I see things shaking out in this series, I think Toronto has the offensive advantage, where the advantage for Boston is defensively. I think that, I think in net, the series is pretty even. I like Freddie's numbers. I like Tuukka Rask's numbers. But where do you guys see it landing in terms of that?
I don't think the Leafs will collapse again in Game 7 because I don't think this series will make it to 7 games. I really like Toronto just as a team this year. I mean, adding John Tavares is going to make any team significantly better than it was last year. And I didn't see them losing much compared to what they gained. I mean, of course, they lost their 2 biggest free agents, but this year they really haven't shown that it's made that much of an impact because you've had guys like Janssen and you've had Kapanen coming into the lineup and making as big, if not bigger, impact. So I think Toronto's going to take this one in 6. And I'm not a Leafs fan. I think this will be the year that it'll be like Alex Burrows exercising the demons against Chicago in 2011.
Yeah, Mike, I have much of the same. I actually do think Toronto has the edge in this one. I think if you remember back to the last series between these two teams, I don't think it was personnel which lost the Leafs the series. I think Babcock was outcoached. I think Freddie didn't have a great playoffs that season. He posted like an 8-9-6 or something.
Yeah.
Not great, but he also came up with some big saves. Me and Ian were talking about it. But overall, I think you're right to mention that Toronto has added a lot of depth up front. John Tavares, 50-goal scorer, nicely slide into the first role there. You push Austin Matthews down. I know Kadri hasn't had a great season. Guys like Nylander, too, haven't produced as much, but man, I think Toronto has gained the edge. I also think Jake Muzzin is a big thing to add on the back end. Time and time again, we saw Boston dump the puck into the corner where a Zaitsev, a Hainsey, a Pollock was, and they simply can't play with the puck. That hasn't changed for Zaitsev. And Zaitsev and Hainsey, they both still don't know how to play the puck, but I think that not as green of a Dermott helps in that situation, but also Jake Muzzin, a very calm, cool, and collected player on the puck. Marshall, where do you see this one landing?
I also don't see it going to a Game 7, but I am taking the black and yellow in this series just simply because I'm going to sound like a hypocrite later when it comes to we're talking about Winnipeg, but I don't think that Toronto has the edge going into it, and that's going to make a difference for the first couple games. I think Anderson, when he is his best, is better than Rask at his best, but there's no history that shows Anderson will be the best in playoffs.
Well, Anderson does have a great playoff history. Other than last year, if you look at him, all of his save percentages are above 9 914. I was looking at it yesterday. One year he posted a 947 in 5 games.
Well, recency bias makes me want to believe in Boston more. I think the other big difference is, as much as Jake Muzzin is a good depth addition, along with having Gardner back, one of those two guys get injured, and the Leafs are SOL when it comes to defense. There's no way that they can match up against the forward lines that Boston can throw at them.
Yeah, and I don't think you can understate just how deep Boston is up front too. And I mean, you look at Toronto, and they match up well in terms of, they have forwards up and down their lineup, but Boston has that too, and then Boston has their defense, and personally I do prefer it to Toronto's. Where I think it will really make the difference is, again, with Freddie Anderson, because he is a player who elevates his game in the playoffs. He's done it time and time again with Anaheim, and now that he's come to Toronto, and he's played very, very well as a Toronto Maple Leaf, and I don't believe he's a player that will be razzled by the playoffs. I think when he has faltered with Toronto, I don't think it's been entirely his fault. And I mean,
it hasn't been,
No.
but at the end of the day, you see it with Holtby, you see it with Murray. The teams that win the cups are because the goalie steals it, and Anderson hasn't really stole anything yet.
with Toronto.
But he
Yes.
definitely, you can't say that he doesn't have the potential
No,
to do
and
it.
that's
He's
what-
been stealing games for the
and
Leafs
that's what I'm
all
saying.
year,
I think if he can steal it, he will. Toronto will win. But right now, for this series, I don't think he will. So that's why I'm picking Boston. That's just my thinking. I don't think he's going to steal the game versus I think Rask can steal that game. So that's just, if he proves me wrong, then good for him and good on Toronto.
Well, I mean, you brought up depth. I think depth is going to factor a lot in this series. Boston and Toronto can throw out some of the best players in the entire league. I think I give Boston the slight edge on overall raw talent. You look at the guys of Pastrnak, Bergeron, and Marchand. Those guys all were on a pace for 100 points this season.
Very good
They
players.
guys and Bergeron and Marchand did it without Pastrnak.
Yeah.
But I think the Leafs do have the depth over the Boston Bruins. I like Krejci in the middle. We're gonna get to
Players
to watch in just a minute, and he's my personal pick. But I would have Austin Matthews above him 9 times out of 10. I'd also have Nazem Kadri, the third line center on this team, above. Who's Boston's third line center? Is it?
It is Charlie Coyle.
Yeah, I was going to say over Charlie Coyle any day. I also think that the Leafs were hindered last year when Kadri got a ridiculous suspension for 3 games. How was that 3 games? But, I mean,
That's
me,
a debate for another day.
That's me bickering and crying. I think that the Leafs have this series. I think that it's a coin flip, and it's the closest of any of the series by Dom Lucian under his model. He has the Leafs by what? Point 1.
Dom Lucian on The Athletic has the Leafs winning, I believe, he has the Leafs winning this series 50.1%.
Yeah.
That is the probability of them winning this series.
And yet none of us have it going to 7 games.
And none of us have it going to 7 games. But I just don't think it'll get there this time. I think it's a matter of, I just think it's a matter of time. And I think the Leafs have come so close to winning these types of games and these types of series. And first it was 4-1. Last year it was 5-1. And this, in terms of Jake Gardner, that's the joke. But this year I think it'll be 4-2.
Well, I mean, talking about Jake Gardner, I don't think anyone has raised their stock as much by simply not playing as Jake Gardner has. That Leafs defensive core was horrible, and Mike Babcock was asked about Jake in the scrum today, and he said, he's a good player, and I'm going to play him a lot. And I think that's exactly what he needs to do.
Well,
Mike Babcock, throughout the whole season, has not played his star players enough. Tavares averages
Which
about
isn't-
19 minutes.
It's not a bad thing entering playoffs to have.
No, the guys are nice and fresh
Yeah.
and nice and rested, but it's all about how he uses them. He can't ice Ron Hainsey 23 minutes a night. He can't ice Nikita
Well,
Zaitsev
he can. It's
18
not a good
minutes
idea.
a night. He shouldn't be playing the fourth line more than 8 minutes. And I don't know if you guys listened to Ian Tulloch's podcast, but he was talking about running 11-7 for the Leafs, having Callie Rosen come up and cutting Gould from the lineup, and I think it makes a lot
Speaking
of
from an
sense.
Ottawa perspective, 11-7, not great.
It doesn't work. It really doesn't. I think you just have to go with what your forwards and your defensemen are most comfortable with. And I don't think defensemen, having to change pairings in the middle of a game when everything is going well, if you're winning and then you're running with 11-7, and all of a sudden you have to get that other guy into the rotation. That's where mistakes happen.
Well, no, I completely agree with you there. But on another hand, the Leafs' GOAT is not, or Frederick Gauthier rather, is not the most fantastic of players. He's not the best skater, and I think speed is going to factor a lot. He's also not that much of a physical player either. I'd rather throw Ennis and Trevor Moore out there with Nazem Kadri or John Tavares or Austin Matthews for an extra 1 or 2 shifts a night. I think it makes sense because of the Leafs roster composition. But you know,
while we're on the subject of fourth lines, it might be a good time to transition into the players to watch.
Well, why? Who is the player that you have to watch, Mike? I think
I think for the other side, for Boston, I think my player to watch is a player who used to be one of the best two-way players in the NHL. Isn't so much that anymore. He's being paid $6 million a year. But David Backes is my player to watch, Boston's fourth-line center.
And why?
Well, he's being paid $6 million, and he'll be leaned on, I think, more heavily than your usual number 4 center. But I think this series is going to come down to the depth contributions and the goaltending. But when it comes to the actual skaters, I think the Leafs' bottom end of their lineup is sometimes a little bit porous. Sometimes
Are we talking forwards or defense here?
Both.
Both?
A little bit porous, a little bit shaky. And I think David Backes, I mean, if you look at Dom Luszczyszyn, his game score value added statistic puts David Backes at a whole win above, like, that's pretty impressive for a fourth line center. And I think David Backes, he's not the player he used to be. Last month he gave an interview in which he said he wanted to transition into a goon role.
Well, I was about to bring that up.
I thought was kind of funny, but he's actually still a decent player, and I think he might make the difference, especially compared to maybe who the Leafs have on their fourth line.
I don't know. I think that David Backes is one to watch out for. Personally, I said David Krejci. Lit up the Leafs in 2013-14. 2013, 2012-13.
2012-13.
I try and block it out of my mind. We already mentioned crying incident.
What, the Game 7s thing?
Yeah, Game 7 thing.
The giving up the lead thing?
Nah.
Misery loves company.
But David Krejci put up 70 points this year. Him and Jake DeBrusk. I was going to say Alex. Thank you. Jake DeBrusk, who scored the game-winning goal against the Leafs
last year.
It's
true.
Broke my heart. Have worked really well this year. DeBrusk, I believe, has 35 goals this year. Krejci, as I said, 70 points, and
DeBrusk had 27 goals this year.
27. Yep. Thank you.
In 68 games, so
on pace for 35.
Close to that pace, yeah.
And I think that him being down the middle is much more important, and that's why I gave him the edge over a guy like DeBrusk. But I think that second line will be very, very important because I think the Leafs have the capability to shut down one of the best line, if not the best line in hockey. But I think that if you can roll out a line where guys like Krejci and DeBrusk are going every single shift, and that's a line that brings a lot of speed and a lot of tenacity, it'll cause the Leafs some issues.
And if you're talking about guys who lead the playoffs in scoring twice, that's what you get from David Krejci because he's done it twice.
Exactly. I think that he's a very important player and will be the difference maker in this series depending on which second line
I think scoring and tenacity can also describe Brad Marchand, who last year had more points than games played in the playoffs. So when it comes to being a difference maker, he has that ability. He has shown it in his time with Boston. It is not just in scoring, but he can get under people's skins, a la Kadri,
a la licking.
Well, if it I don't like it, but if it works for the playoffs. So I think he will be able to get past the porous defense and rack up some numbers against
100
Toronto.
points in the regular season this year for Brad Marchand.
Which the last 5 years would have been considered amazing. Now it's just like, there's Kucherov.
I believe 5th in league scoring.
Yeah. So it's just
ridiculous.
Yep.
I think that it's not a bad thing either to have 100 points and not be heralded as amazing, because then you can just waltz right in and be yourself, not go under any pressure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that Brad Marchand has done a good job of using social media to beautify his image, and I think that
very much
some people have forgotten how much of an absolute pest he is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it'll be on full display come tomorrow.
He's always been the epitome of if he's on your team, you'll love him. If he's against you, hate him.
Yep.
When he wears a Team Canada jersey, he's the best player on the ice in terms of difference maker.
Yeah.
No, I've told the story a couple of times.
That's
I know.
dope.
I know that you know it. I don't know if you know it, but
What?
my buddy met him in Italy this
Oh,
summer.
really?
Yeah, yeah, in Italy this summer, and he walked up to him and asked him to take a picture. And
Yeah.
when they were all arms around each other to take the picture, my buddy looks over at Brad and he goes, "Please don't lick me," and then goes and takes the picture.
That's
I
great.
think. But I mean, I think everyone is right here. I think a lot of players can factor in for Boston. We'll get to Toronto in just a second, but I also think that the Leafs defense is being a little bit undervalued. This is a core that hasn't played together as an entire core for more than 5 games with Jake Gardner's injury, Travis Dermott's injury, and I think a lot of that has clouded the last little bit for the Leafs. In 2019, they're 20-17-6. That's no avoiding it. But they've lost a lot of man game, a lot of hard miles with players going out of the injury, and I think that the Leafs defense will shock a couple of people, and that's why I have them winning this series. But in terms of Leaf players that you want to stand out, Mike?
Well, there are 2 players, I suppose. I came up with another one, but 2 that really stick out to me as who can impact this series because they've actually made it far in the playoffs before, which is something you can't really say about most of the Leafs. And they are Patrick Marleau and Jake Muzzin.
No, Daddy Marleau.
And I mean, Muzzin is pretty obvious. He's made the Cup final twice. I believe I think he was on the Kings team that first time, and he was definitely on the Kings team that second time. And he played in the World Cup of Hockey. He's a very, very good player. And I think Toronto's defense maybe has been underscored in years past by their shakiness, by their inability to cope with pressure. And Jake Muzzin has played in a lot of very important games for the Los Angeles Kings. And I think coming over to Toronto is going to be really big. And if you look at Patrick Marleau, who is the most experienced player in the entire NHL, that is going to be enormous for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Especially considering that they have him on the third line, and he still has good speed, and I think he can still make a difference. So that's what I see for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I think Patrick Marleau needs to bring something different. He has regressed a lot this year. He hasn't been the same player as he was in past. He doesn't have the same foot speed. He just can't seem to find the back of the net either. I haven't really liked his game. He's gone missing a lot, but I do agree. I think experience is something that helps a lot of teams, and Marleau, a big locker room guy, and I think keeping good momentum and keeping everybody happy in that locker room will be a big one.
And
Marshall,
184 playoff games for Marleau, by the way.
ridiculous. One of the best players ever to play the game. Marshall, your pick for the Leafs?
Well, I'm kind of doing what I said I wasn't going to do, but now I am going to, in a way, do it. Last year, 23 goals in 7 games. It's not ideal when it comes to playoff time. If you can go back to that Anaheim form, Toronto will win. If he goes back to last year form, they will lose. Simple as that.
Yeah, I think it couldn't have been said any better. This team lives and dies with Anderson, but that's not my pick. My pick is William Nylander. A lot has been talked about William Nylander.
A lot has been talked about William Nylander.
I
Too
love
much.
Willie. I love Willie. I love him. He looks
not touch Willie.
He looks like he could be my TA for any history class. Beanie wearing, beard having guy. But I think that a lot of pressure is on Nylander. He hasn't been able to put the puck in the net this year. Does 7 goals.
20 assists, 27 points in 54 games.
Now that's points wise, that's not good enough.
It's a 41-point pace.
But if you look at everything else he does, night in, night out, he leads the team in transition numbers. He's so good at getting the puck into the offensive zone. He's going to start the series on Kadri's wing, or at least that's how they've been practicing. But I think that Mike needs to maximize what he can get out of William Nylander. Ian Tulloch broke this down a couple of weeks ago, but both players and the Leafs as a whole see mass benefit when Nylander and Matthews play together. Nylander is a perimeter player. He's really good at dishing the puck just about anywhere he wants. He's so good at gaining the zone and then finding a pass. Matthews drives that net very, very hard, and he knows how to put the puck in the back of the net. He's put up 40 goal seasons in his first 3. Did he hit 40 this year?
Matthews?
Did he? I
believe
don't know
so.
if Matthews hit 40 this year, but I know he did in his past 2, or was on
Austin Matthews goal scorer?
37 goals for Austin this year, 68 games played.
on pace for
Well
over 40.
over 40.
But I think that having a player like William Nylander, having that playmaking ability, yes, he's down in the lineup. Maybe he gets Kadri going, but I'd like to see him up with a Matthews. Have something to rival Boston's first line in terms of that dynamic duo.
Yep.
And I think that if William Nylander shows up and figures out how to put the puck in the back of the net, the Leafs will win this
I
series.
generally agree with that. I think with Nylander, he didn't get off to the start anybody wanted him to get off to. And this is just another fresh slate of zeros for him going into the playoffs. And you look, though, at his playoff history, and this is a player with 13 playoff games and 2 goals. So that's something that he needs to change. And he's 22, and he's just getting better every year. I mean, he should be. And so I see no reason why this can't be the coming out party of William Nylander. Because you look, this is a player who gets talked about far too much for the player that he is. His career high in points is 61. That's great. But, I mean, if this can be the best William Nylander, I think, that we can see this year. I really think this could be his really his coming out party. In a year that so many young stars are progressing so heavily. This is a guy who's regressed, but this is a fresh slate of zeros. So I think he can maybe go point per game if the Leafs win this series.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think Nylander needs to have a coming out party, but why don't we quickly transition on to the next series?
Let's do that.
Tampa Bay Columbus, head-to-head. Tampa Bay has swept away the Columbus Blue Jackets.
It swept away a lot of people this year.
Oh, yeah. That's what happens when you lose when you win 3 and 4 games throughout the entire season.
That was hard for you to get out.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I know.
62 wins for Tampa Bay this year, the most of any team in history, which is very impressive.
Tied with.
Yes, well, yeah, but it's still the most. No team has had more.
Okay.
I think we're arguing over semantics here.
Yes.
Anyways, I've given the edge to Tampa Bay in terms of offense and defense, and I think that if Bobrovsky plays to the level that we know he can, the goaltending in this series is a tie. Vasilevsky is one of the best goaltenders in the entire league.
Absolutely.
I would argue the best, but in terms of players to watch and what to look for in this series, what are you guys thinking? Because I have Columbus in a sweep, or Tampa Bay in a sweep. Rather.
I have Tampa in 5, but I would not be surprised if it is a sweep. For Colorado, though, I'm going to go back to. Thank you for Columbus, though. I don't know why. I COL, that's why. For Columbus, I would say Duchesne is their difference maker. Not the difference maker, the guy who needs to step up. Because this is a guy who has 2 playoff series in his career, which is impressive for his age and how good he is, and the reason he was brought over to Columbus and originally brought over to Ottawa. So if he doesn't deliver on why he has been now traded twice, it's going to be not great on Yarko. They don't need to win, but he needs to show that he is worth what they gave up, being a first and possibly a second first.
Yeah. You look at, Matt Duchesne, 8 playoff games in his career, and do you know how many goals he has in those 8 playoff games?
1.
0. He has 0 career playoff goals, which isn't very good. Especially
to be fair, his first playoff series was his first ever season.
It's true.
So you can't fault him on that.
Yes,
but still, not great.
He didn't have any in his next series either, and that came in his 5th season in
Again,
the
only
NHL.
2 games.
Yes, it was only 2 games he was hurt. But that being said, Jarmo Kekalainen paid a very pretty penny to acquire Matt Duchesne. And, I mean, he has freedom to maybe give up less than he actually, it looks like on paper, because if Matt Duchesne repeats those playoff performances, I don't think he'll be re-signed. I don't think he'll be re-signed anyway. But
I think he will be,
You
especially if he delivers.
I don't think so.
I don't
think that
think so.
first round pick is just too much.
If Columbus is intent upon signing somebody of Matt Duchesne's stature, just go after somebody else. Because if you go after somebody else, then you don't have to give up a second first-round pick. I mean, for me, I would keep my first and maybe go after somebody a little worse. Because I don't want to. Matt Duchesne.
Knowing that you're going to lose the breadbasket and Bobrovsky and Panarin, I guess, you keep the first.
You gotta keep your assets, man. I mean,
so Duchesne is your player to make difference?
No, he's not. My player to watch is Alexander Wenberg, who is a player who has come under a lot of scrutiny in Columbus this year. Wenberg 2 years ago he was second on Columbus in points with 59 points. And this year, he is not second on Columbus in points because Alex Wenberg this year, I believe, is making about $5.5 million, and he has 2 goals.
$4.9 million this year.
$4.9 million, yeah. And he has
2 goals, 23 assists.
23 assists.
Games.
And this is a player who is, I believe, I don't think he's happiest under John Tortorella's system. to say the least. And
Wouldn't be the first to say that.
he wouldn't be the first to say that. And with Wenberg, I mean, if you look, I have Columbus losing this one in 6. I'm a little bit higher on them than a lot of teams, but with a guy like Wenberg, I mean, if you look at Tampa Bay, they have scorers on every single line. I mean, JT Miller is on their 4th line. And so Columbus needs to counter that. And right now, their 4th line center is Riley Nash, who had 3 goals this season. So, and then you have guys who like Alex Wenberg, who's their 3rd line center, and he has 2 goals this season. So with Columbus, they need, I would say, actually both Alex Wenberg and Riley Nash to play better. And really, that's their only chance of staying in this series. Because if you look at their top line, it's pretty similar to Tampa Bay's first line. If you look at their second line, it's a little bit worse than Tampa Bay's second line. But if you look at their 3rd and their 4th lines, that's where the discrepancy really comes through. And so if they want a chance to really stick with this Tampa Bay team, it's all about Nash and Wenberg's lines. Really.
I think my player for this game is one of my favorites in the entire NHL, but also I think that it's a player that does need to step up and needs to continue to produce, and it's Panarin. Panarin, the star in Columbus.
Yes, Panarin is the star.
Panarin is my favorite Columbus Blue Jacket.
Panarin is my favorite Columbus Blue Jacket.
Okay, that's good.
All right, good. Thank you.
Why?
Artemi Panarin was excellent for the first 2 games of Columbus's first-round series last year against Washington. Then he kind of disappeared, and they lost 4 straight.
Well, I mean, more in that vein, I think that star power will be very important.
In this series especially.
Especially, and for Columbus, they need their star players to step up.
Yeah.
I think that, relying on some depth will be helpful, but you have to find a way to counteract the 3-headed demon of Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and Steven Stamkos. I don't think anybody can, but I think that if Panarin goes back to the comes into the fold and plays fantastic hockey, some of the best hockey in his entire career, hockey that, I mean, will earn the money that he will make in this offseason, because I think he will be a very, very rich man this offseason. I think that Columbus might make a series of it, but I'm not too high on that.
So
you have a sweep, though, don't you?
I do have a sweep. I'm not that high on it.
So we're all picking Tampa, but we all have different games. Last series, we all had the same games, but different teams.
Well, I mean, 2 of us had the same team.
We weren't unanimous.
We weren't unanimous. We were unanimous about this one, but this is actually a series that I could see Columbus pulling off. And that is this good transition into my player to watch. That is if Nikita Kucherov repeats his performance last year in the playoffs, which was not nearly as good as his performance in the regular season. And Nikita Kucherov, if he repeats his performance from the playoffs this year, well, that'll substantiate a massive downgrade from his performance in the regular season, where he had 128 points to lead the league. Last year, Nikita Kucherov had 17 points in 17 playoff games, which is impressive. I mean, it's very good, but it's not world beater good. It's not as good as Ovechkin was. And if Kucherov is even the second most productive player in this playoff series, the Lightning are in trouble. I think it has to revolve around your star player. And if he isn't playing like the star player he is, and he isn't putting up otherworldly points, even in more tight checking games, because every single game he's played this year, he's showed that he can survive tight checking. The Eastern Conference is a very good conference, and he plays in a very good division, and yet he still put up 128 points. So if he goes down to just a point per game, I think that could be a real difference maker.
And I think that's major credit to Nikita Kucherov, one of the best players in the entire league right now. And I don't think I entirely disagree with that. But I'm looking a little further down the roster for Tampa Bay, and I'm looking at Tyler Johnson, a guy that's performed in the playoffs time after time. Last year, not the best playoffs. He only did get 18 points, but hoping to find his form from 15-16 and 14-15, where he put up 23 and 17 points respectively in those years. I think Tyler Johnson, a guy lower down in the lineup, that not maybe the most obvious name, but I think he has the potential to break this series right open and push this Tampa Bay team over the top and give them a sweep.
Yep.
I have someone who won't break the series open. He's not going to be the difference like Kucherov is, but I have Ryan McDonough because Hedman's health is of a question right now. He will be playing, but concussions are a funny thing. So if he might have to step up, especially if Hedman's on 100%, and his playoff history's been steady for a second-line defenseman. So I think if he's able to continue that trend and keep the second-line Columbus players intact, then it will definitely be a big beneficiary to Tampa. But again, that's only if Hedman's not 100%. If he's 100%, then McDonough just needs to play the way he should be playing.
Yep,
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that's 100% right.
I just want to reiterate something about Nikita Kucherov, because last year against Washington, okay, the Tampa Bay Lightning were definitely the favorite in that series, and Nikita Kucherov scored 1 goal in 7 games. And I know how much plus minus is derided, but Nikita Kucherov in that series was a -6, and he put up 1, 2, 3, 4. He put up 5 points in 7 games. And so that to me is a player who sometimes doesn't come through in the big moments. And he had a very good line, the triplets line, a few years ago with Palat and Johnson, and he performed very well in the playoffs. But last year, it was a very different monster for Nikita Kucherov. And so I think if that happens again, I could see them losing in the first round very, very easily.
And what an upset that would be. Both teams, Columbus threw everything into this year, and I think that they might catch Tampa Bay off guard. And I think that that's something that not a lot of teams that not a lot of people are talking about, the desperation on the Columbus Blue Jackets part. But why don't we move on to the next series now and go Washington, Carolina? I think a lot of people have this one open and shut. I know you don't, Mike. An interesting take on this one.
No.
Washington won all 4 meetings between these two teams this season. I also give Washington the edge offensively, where I give Carolina the edge defensively, and I like Holtby much better than I like Peter Mrazek.
Yes.
Why don't we start with a general overview, Mike? Your thoughts on why you think Carolina has a chance in this series?
I think Carolina takes this series in 5 games because I really, really like the Carolina Hurricanes. I think ever since they pulled off that ridiculous trade with the Minnesota Wild where they acquired Nino Niederreiter, I think they've been one of the best teams in hockey. And they've had one of the most balanced attacks. They have great forwards on their top 3 lines, which is something that I don't know. I mean, Washington has that too, but then they have great defense. I really like Carolina Hurricanes defense. My only question with Carolina is in goal, but both of their guys have been very solid all season. And with Carolina, I mean, you can't get better, like really, than how their top 6 is played down the stretch, because it's been absolutely fantastic.
I mean, you could be the St. Louis Blues.
St. Louis hasn't really been coasting on their top 6. They've been coasting on Jordan Binnington and their top line and their top 2 pairings on defense. But if I'm looking at Carolina, and I have Teuvo Teravainen on my second line, who had 76 points this season, Nino Niederreiter is on my top line, and he's just performed perfectly with Sebastian Aho. He has 30 points in 36 games since that trade. And the
Finnish one or the Swedish one? Which one?
Sebastian Aho, not the New York Islanders one.
Ridiculous that there's 2 players in this league,
that
both
have the
named
exact same
Sebastian
name.
Aho from different countries.
And I think
Such a weird name, Sebastian, too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
What a weird name.
Like,
Gross
Who
name.
would name a kid that?
What
God.
monster of a human being.
Sorry, Mike, you were saying?
I was saying I'm just gonna go into my players to watch for Carolina right now because Michael Furland is an incredible playoff performer. We saw it 4 years ago with Calgary. He had an incredible first round series against Vancouver, in which I believe he had about 40 hits in 6 games. And I still think he's that player. And then I look at there's 2 other players for Carolina who I see. I see Jordan Stahl, who has been just terrific since he came back from injury midseason.
The veteran presence on that team.
Absolutely.
And a very underrated player, in my
veteran
opinion.
player, a veteran presence because they have Justin Williams too. But Jordan Stahl, I mean, look at what he's done. He has a Stanley Cup. He's been all the way down there twice, and I think he's a very good player. And then I have Dougie Hamilton, who is a very divisive player.
Oh, museum boy.
Yes, museum boy. Very, very interesting player because his playoff performance has left a lot to be desired in the past. And he isn't getting maybe the minutes that some of Carolina's other defensemen are. He's 4th on the team in time on ice. But if he isn't being forced to play the top competition like he was in Calgary or Boston, then oh boy, that might be because Dougie Hamilton does best when the pressure is a little bit lower. So if the pressure is a little bit lower, he's maybe facing Washington's second or third line. I think he could really be an impact player for Carolina.
You mentioned my guy, Nino Niederreiter. He is a deadline acquisition, as you said, one of the biggest ones in terms of what they got back. And when it comes to playoff performances in the past, a lot to be desired. The last 2 seasons he's played in the playoffs, 10 games total, 1 point total.
Mm.
So if he can, not be like that, he once had 6 points in 6 games,
Pretty good.
but he has, in the last 3 playoff seasons, he has never made it out of the first round. So that's part of it. But at the end of the day, if he can just not be that kind of player, it will be a huge help and a huge relief off of the other players like Dougie and leaving the pressure off him.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you make a good point. I thought that was a ridiculous trade. Carolina's done a good job of that. Marshall, which way do you have that series fallen?
I have Washington in 5. Again, not be surprised if it's a sweep, just because I think people are, as much as they're overrating Carolina, as much as people are rating Carolina, it's really good. Everyone's just looking at Washington like, yeah, so you won last year, so you're not going to win this year.
Yeah, I think I completely agree, and I see Washington taking this series in 6 games. And I think a lot of that will come down to my player of the series for the Carolina Hurricanes, and that's Peter Mrazek. I think a lot of teams live and die by their goaltending, especially a team like Carolina, who in the past has been kept out because they've had pretty crappy goaltending. Mrazek, though, is pretty good in the playoffs. Yep. If you ignore what he did last year with Philadelphia in the one game he played. The previous couple, he posted a 9.45 and 15.16 in a couple of games. When he was with the Detroit Red Wings in 14-15, he put up a 9.25. The year before that, a 9.11. Yep. So I think that Peter Mrazek will be the reason this team hangs on in this series. I just think that this series, and I mean it already has one of the teams that was in the series when the Leafs played. I think Carolina is in a very similar situation as the 15-16 Leafs, or the 16-17 Leafs, the first year they made the playoffs. They were a young, scrappy team like these Carolina Hurricanes. We're riding on hope, betting with house money, and I think that at the end of the day, the Washington Capitals will show their experience and they'll show their class. And we'll take this series, and I believe that will be led by Evgeny Kuznetsov. I think Kuznetsov, a player who doesn't play on the top line with Ovi, plays on that second line, plays second fiddle to Backstrom, will be a big part here. I think that especially him on the power play is crucial for this team. He's a player that can put the puck just about anywhere he wants. He's a great player in transition and definitely knows how to pass that puck anywhere. I think that if he steps up, Washington takes this with ease.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm incredibly bullish on the Carolina Hurricanes. I have them going to the Stanley Cup final, which is maybe a bit of a bold prediction, but I think they are going to get there because I think Tampa Bay is going to be eliminated before Carolina would meet them. On the Washington side, I see a team. I mean, you always talk about the Stanley Cup hangover, and for after the summer they had, it might be a real hangover. But for Washington, they lost a really big piece of their defense on the eve of the playoffs. They lost Michael Kempny. And I think that's really going to hurt them because Kempny really strengthened their defense last year. And so that's why my player to watch for the Washington Capitals is Nick Jensen, the player that they acquired from the Detroit Red Wings at the trade deadline, who they subsequently signed to a very similar long-term deal like Kempny, and who is going to be slotted in beside John Carlson on that top pairing. But the thing is, I mean, that was with Kempny, Carlson just moved to another level. During the regular season this year, I mean, he was one of the highest scoring defensemen in the league, where he hasn't really been that in years before. And then defensively, they've just been a complete match. And so I think Washington's defense is hit and miss. And I think if that pairing doesn't gel, I mean, Carolina's scoring. I mean, for years, Carolina's been the team that just has never been able to score. Well, now they can score. And they have 3 lines that I think can score. And so if Nick Jensen can't perform with John Carlson in a proper way like Kempny did last year, then I think it's Carolina all the way. All the way.
Just quickly for mine, I have Wilson, just because he's the X factor. There's no other player quite like him other than maybe Ryan Reeves and Marchand, but Marchand won't fight, and Ryan can't score like Wilson will. So he is the best at what he does in terms of what he brings to a team. And he can scare the crap out of someone like, say, Dougie Hamilton and make his life a living hell. So
he's also getting paid for these moments. A hefty contract. He definitely needs to show up.
Absolutely.
I think that contract is 100% deserved.
Yeah, no, they won a cup in part because of him. It's like you take out Ovechkin, they won't win. You take out Holtby, they won't win. And if you take out Wilson, I don't think they win. So I think he deserves what he is getting. as long as he, again, can show up once again. But for what he did, he got what he deserved.
I'm not here to argue the laurels of Tom Wilson's contract. We simply don't have the time to. Why don't we move on to the next series? Penguins versus the Islanders, the last one in the East, and we'll finish up with this team in the East. I don't see this one being a competition, guys. I think the Penguins sweep the Islanders.
Really?
Really?
I don't believe in their goal.
This is the only series in the East I have going to 7 right now.
I don't believe their defense. I think the power of Sidney Crosby will them into the second round pretty handily. Call this me being sad on the Islanders or down on the Islanders or whatever, but I think that a team that hasn't been able to put the puck in the net and has rested on both of their goaltenders all year is not a team that is going to succeed.
Well, to be fair, Pittsburgh rested on their goaltenders when they won.
It's true.
So, not the worst thing to happen. But I still have Pittsburgh winning in 7.
I have the New York Islanders winning this one in 6. To me, I believe that some teams are magic, and the New York Islanders this season have been one of the most incredible stories. I mean, there was an article that I read before the year ranking all 31 teams from best to Islanders. And now they have home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs against Sidney Crosby, and I think they're going to make the most of it because the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum, or whatever it's called now, it has a new name. It's like NYCB Live or something.
Yeah, but we still call we still call a Saddle Dome a Saddle Dome.
I mean, but it's still called the Saddle Dome.
There's a sponsor to
It's the Scotiabank Saddle Dome. Yes. But the New York Islanders this year are a team that I think have the potential to go a long way. And I think they're going to meet the Hurricanes in the second round, and I think that series is going 7 because those are two teams that have something about them this year that's really interesting to watch. They've both made the media a lot more than anybody really expected. And yeah, the Islanders just have depth, man. Like it used to be said that Islanders' fourth line was the best fourth line in hockey, and they're back. And now the Islanders' top 6. You know what? They can score. I don't think they're nearly as bad as they as you purport. And then their defense has been really good. I don't think a lot of people expected that, especially considering that they finished 31st in goals against last year. And a lot of it is on the back of their 2 excellent goaltenders. I don't think anybody expected them to be as good as they were coming into this year.
And I mean, I'm really happy for Robin Leonard.
Oh,
too.
Absolutely.
What a story.
Yeah, Robin Leonard,
story that guy is.
No matter who signs Robin Leonard, he's going to get a lot of money this summer. And I think this is a case of a team being a team and all about the team. And they have a lot of players who have come up this year and have contributed to the team. And I think that team is going to beat the Penguins in 6.
Okay, I think that's more than fair. I'm just not very high on the Islanders' goal scoring capabilities, and I think Matt Murray has it in him to out goaltender Robin Leonard. Those are my personal picks for the X factors in both of these. I think whoever has a better goaltender will show up on the day, and I think that at the end of the day, all 4 outings will be Matt Murray stealing the show and not really giving the Islanders much.
Perhaps.
I have 2 wingers being the X factors, Kessel and Eberle. I think Eberle, despite his young age, is Nino Niederreiter is a veteran on New York. He's going to have to show that veteran presence. And in the last 5 games, he has 4 goals and only 9 shots, so he can find a way to find the net. On the other side, though, I think Kessel, when it comes to his playoff pedigree, the 2 times that he's won with the Penguins, he was scoring. He had 10 goals in 24 games with 12 assists. Last year, he only had 1 goal in 2 series. So that, I think, is the difference. If he can score, Pittsburgh will win easily, in my opinion. If he doesn't score, it'll be a fight, but I still think Pittsburgh's going to win.
Well, for me, for the Penguins side, I have 2 defenders who are rated below league replacement level by Dom Lucian, Jack Johnson and Eric Goodbranson. And Jack Johnson and Eric Goodbranson are 2 players who have been around the league for quite a long time. And they're both kind of temperamental players. They have a lot going on and a lot in their own end. It's been for better or for worse over the last few years. But there's been a big resurgence in Eric Goodbranson's play ever since he's come to Pittsburgh, which has been, I don't think anybody expected how well he's actually played for Pittsburgh. And Jack Johnson is a case of, well, we just have to deal with that contract because it goes on for another 4 years after this one. And he's on their second pairing with Justin Schultz. And if that pairing falls apart, well, then the Islanders have a huge edge right away. And if Goodbranson goes back to his old style of play with Vancouver and Florida, well, then I think that just adds another feather to the cap of the New York Islanders, because that defense, I mean, that's where the Islanders have a leg up, because the Penguins have Letang, but after that, it gets a little wonky. It really does.
Yeah, no, I think that the Penguins' defense is definitely suspect. Jack Johnson and Erica Branson, not great players.
Yeah.
And that's putting it mildly, but yeah, I think this one ends in 4 personally. But why don't we transition over to the
Well,
West?
I didn't give my player to watch for the Islanders.
Oh, hurry up, Mike.
Well, I'm sorry. For the Islanders, it's all about their bottom 6. I mean, but if you look at a player who's sort of been in and out of that bottom 6 this year, and I'm looking at a player who I think has more potential than what he's shown, and he is a former top 5 draft pick in this league just 5 years ago, and he wears number 28, and it's Michael Dalcol. I think if he can actually live up to that potential, because he's on their second line, that'll be the big difference, because they need the scoring.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Why don't we transition now over to Winnipeg St. Louis?
Oh.
I think this one might be actually one of the closer series in the entire playoff. St. Louis, one of the hottest teams.
I have going to 7-2.
Winnipeg, one of the guys, I'm struggling for the right word here. One of the coldest teams, have played just about mediocre the whole season, and are now under 500, if I'm not mistaken.
Winnipeg? No.
Are they?
No, not even close.
No.
No, Winnipeg had 99 points at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Okay, I heard. I was listening to TSN.
They
I must
were
have got my
below
signals crossed.
900 or below 500 down the stretch.
Thank
so
you. That's what
absolutely.
I was looking for. Now, I have this one going to 7 as well, and I have the Winnipeg Jets emerging victorious in this.
I
one.
do too, because of my X factor being Patrick Laine.
Wow.
If he scores, that will be if he scores a single goal in the first game, that will be enough of a momentum giver for Winnipeg, because they're not feeling it right now. But if he scores, it will just make the difference, I think. And at the end of the day, Winnipeg, I think, has the better goaltending, and they have the experience. In my opinion, they have the experience in terms of team play.
I would give them the experience for sure. My player to watch for Winnipeg is also Patrick Laine, and for all the same reasons as you. There was just a feature done on him by Christina Rutherford, if I'm not mistaken, on Sportsnet. I haven't gotten around to reading that, but I'm looking forward to it. I think that Laine needs to put one in the back of the net, and then they'll keep coming.
Yeah,
But I've been
it's
saying
simple.
that
Just
all
score.
season. But I've been saying that all season.
I have the Jets roundly losing this one in 5 games. I think St. Louis will be far too much for them to handle. They've been absolutely terrible down the stretch. But if you look at Winnipeg, I believe my player to watch for Winnipeg is Brian Little, who they seem just allergic to putting in their top 6. They always acquire another center at the deadline every year to sort of shove them out of there. But I think where Winnipeg might have a leg up on St. Louis is with their forward depth. And Brian Little's been around for a long time, so maybe he's a guy who will maybe make a difference, because the Blues, I don't know if their forward depth is going to be able to counter it.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, in St. Louis, my player to watch is Jordan Binnington. I think that this team lives and dies with Binnington. I've said it a couple of times with series previous, but I think that series are decided in the net, and I think if Binnington doesn't show up, there's not much to write home.
Absolutely.
For St. Louis. We've already seen a team that doesn't have a good goalie in St. Louis earlier this season.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I got this from Travis O'Reilly, and so when he's on the ice, St. Louis's plus minus for shots is plus 154.
Wow.
Ron O'Reilly, I think if he's on the ice a lot, will probably help St. Louis.
I think Dom Lucian tweeted it out that his WAR, I know, is still developing, but his WAR is almost a whole game over John Tavares at 3.6. Something crazy ridiculous.
Yeah.
No, so it's just I think at the end of the day, he will be, if he's the difference maker he is. Plus, last time he was in the playoffs, 6 points in 7 games.
Yep.
So, not bad.
For me on St. Louis, it's just their second pairing, Colton Parayko and Jay Bouwmeester. They've been terrific since December, but Bouwmeester's a player who showed some signs of slowing down, and if that comes back, I think that'd be really dangerous, because Winnipeg has a leg up on defense, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I think that not a lot is talked about with Winnipeg's defense. I think they're quite similar to Toronto's, actually, just flipped. I think Winnipeg has a great right-sided defense, but not much on the left, and I think this one is going to go down to the wire. I see it going 7 games and Winnipeg emerging victorious.
Not if St. Louis keeps playing like they've played, but...
Momentum going to playoffs is great.
Oh, yeah.
But...
it's a new season.
It's a new season.
You got to capitalize on it. Why don't we continue in the Central with Nashville and Dallas. I think Nashville sweeps this series pretty handily.
So do I.
I like it. I like Nashville. I hope I believe in Pekka Rinne. I think that he can put together a couple of solid performances. They're my personal pick to win the Stanley Cup this year. The Nashville Predators are. I just think that the playoffs are wild, and a team that is going to play a solid defensive game like the Nashville Predators have a leg up. It's not the most exerting style of hockey, and I think my player for them is Pekka Rinne. I've mentioned it before. He needs to come up big. Pekka Rinne has two masks to him. One where he is one of the best goalkeepers, and the other one where he is out of his net at the blue line trying to bat a puck out of midair.
Yep.
It's not great. So I think the Predators live and die with Pekka Rinne.
I can agree with that. I have Dallas winning this series in 7 games. I believe my only 7-game series, and it's going to be all about Kyle Turris for me because he's had just a nightmare season for Nashville. I believe he only has 8 goals this season as their second-line center. That's not good enough, especially for. I mean, it's starting to look like 2 teams lost that Duchesne trade last year, and with Kyle Turris, I mean, if he doesn't play like he's played in years past, I mean. Nashville's biggest advantage on Dallas on paper is their offense because Dallas is the best defensive team in the league. And so if Nashville can't make the most of what they have on paper, well then I think this is Dallas' series to take.
I see Nashville winning in 4. I think Roman Josi is going to really step up and make up for what happened last year with no goals, only 4 points. I think that on the other side, Jimmy Benn, this is his team, and I think he needs to lead this team. I was going to say Tyler Seguin to maybe prove Chiarelli wrong, but at this point, no one has to prove Chiarelli wrong in any way because he proves himself wrong.
Yeah.
So
Every time he opens his
I'm
mouth.
going to stick with Jimmy Benn, but yeah, I think Nashville, this is their series to lose, and I think I have them making the finals. I don't have them winning, though.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, for Dallas, I mean, Dom Luszczyszyn in his series preview said that Dallas has like 4 forwards that are worth anything, and it's Sagan, Radulov, Ben, and Zuccarello. So for me, it's everybody after that. That's who I need to watch for Dallas because I think that's where you can overcome any sort of deficiency that Nashville has because they do, I think, have a deficiency in their depth. And it's all about players like Andrew Cogliano, Blake Como, Jason Spezza, who's projected to be a healthy scratch in Game 1, which is I don't agree with, and even Valery Nichushkin, who has 0 goals this season, and he was supposed to be a great power forward when he was picked in the top 10 of the 2013 draft. So if any of those players can turn out to be anything in the playoffs, I actually like Dallas in the series a bit more.
For me, it's Matt Zuccarello. I don't think we've seen him a hell of a lot in Dallas, largely because he broke his arm in the very first game he played with them. I think that the story in Dallas has always been the 3-headed monster of Radulov, Ben, and Seguin. But I think that if you look a little bit lower and you see a guy like Zuccarello, I think that Dallas wins the series if they put the puck in the back of the net.
Well,
I
absolutely.
think that's a pretty basic statement.
Yeah,
But
because their
But
defense.
you have,
I think that
you have Pekka as your other X factor, so
thi-
you don't think they're going to put the puck
then
in the
I
net.
don't. I think that Dallas can't try to out Nashville and play a great defensive game, and they need to try and go and put the puck in the back of the net, and that starts with Matt Zuccarello.
And for those of you on the Pekka Rinne train, it's important to note that Ben Bishop has actually been a better goalie this season.
Ben Bishop, ridiculous
Yeah.
this year in Dallas, especially down the stretch.
It's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a sweep. I think it'll be a really competitive series. A lot more competitive than you guys think. I think personally.
How competitive do you think the next series is going to be? San Jose versus Vegas.
Oh, incredible! I don't, but I think
do.
it'll be competitive.
Who do you have winning?
I have the San Jose Sharks emerging victorious
Me too.
in this one, in 7 games, as you mentioned. I think that, Vegas was a magical story going all the way last year, but I just can't see a repeat. I think San Jose is just. I think they're significantly better in certain areas than them, and this team will live and die with my player of the series in Martin Jones. Jones has not been great
It's been awful.
this year, but playoff Martin Jones is a whole other beast.
Until you get to the conference finals.
Well, yeah, but we're talking about the first round here.
Fair
buddy.
enough.
You know, I mean, you're talking about last series where you had 2 goalies going up against each other, and their game score value added. Ben Bishop was 5.2, and Pekka Rinne was 5.1. Those are the third and the 4th best marks in the league. Okay, Martin Jones is negative 0.7. His save percentage this year was 898. Or 896. He's the starting goalie on the worst save percentage team in the NHL by an absolute mile. But I have San Jose winning this series in 6 games just because I don't like Vegas' forwards, and I don't like their defense. I absolutely don't like their defense. And I think if Marc-Andre Fleury's in net, he's going to be left out to dry.
Well, I think he was left out to dry last year, but I just want to interject with this stat. Playoff Martin Jones in the last 3 seasons in the playoffs with San Jose, he doesn't have a save percentage lower than a 9.23, and that was in his first year.
Yeah.
The ones following that, a 9.35 and a 9.28. Sorry, Marshall.
Well, I think the difference, I see Vegas, and you may disagree with me, I see Vegas and Toronto kind of similarly in the sense that great forwards, defense is so-so, and goalies can be a difference maker. But the difference is I see Vegas goalie, Fleury, being that difference maker. Yeah. I think he can do what he did last year, not for a whole playoffs. I don't have them getting past the second round, but I have them getting past the first round, with Fleury leading the way, beating San Jose in 7.
Yeah.
But for San Jose, though, my player is Carlson, because I just want to talk about Ottawa one more time.
Okay, buddy.
I think if he can return to 2017 playoff form, that will be amazing. I don't think it will happen, but if it does happen, I think that can be the difference-making factor for me for San Jose.
My players to watch are 2 centers, Joe Thornton and Paul Stastny. Joe Thornton is San Jose's third-line center, and Paul Stastny is Vegas' second-line center. And I think if Thornton can really show up, then he'll be just as good as Vegas' second-line center in this series. And I think ultimately that will be what makes the difference.
I have Flower as well for all of the reasons Marshall said before. I think this one will be a goaltender battle, much like it was last year. Why don't we talk about an offensive battle with our final playoff series? Mike, your Calgary Flames going up against the Colorado Avalanche.
Yep.
Calgary swept all 3 games these teams played against each other this year.
Yep.
And
well,
I don't see this being much of a series. I have Calgary in 5.
I also have Calgary in 5, and there's all sorts of debate about Calgary's goaltending situation. Mike Smith, I believe, has the current best playoff save percentage of any active goaltender, but that's all based off of 1 year. And so if you look at the 2 Calgary goaltenders in this series, both of them, I believe, are fantastic in their careers against Colorado. I mean, that's indisputable. David Riddick, I believe, is 5-1 in his career against Colorado, and Mike Smith, I think, is 12-1-3.
Riddick had a little bit of an injury today.
Did he?
Yes, something came up. They called up the
John Gillies. Nope, that's not true. John Gillies was called up to be the practice goalie for their Black Aces. Riddick is fine.
That's something that I saw somewhere where
an
hour ago.
No, John Gillies. No. And David Riddick is fine.
Okay.
And they're going with Mike Smith to start the series. That is true.
I got Riddick in my playoff.
They're going with Mike Smith to start the series. Namely because Mike Smith and David Riddick have sort of switched bodies going down the stretch, because I believe ever since the new year, David Riddick is something like an 8.98, whereas Mike Smith's a 9.12. And so Mike Smith's been the considerably better goaltender. But neither of those guys are my player to watch for this series. I watch a lot of this team, and it's all about depth again, and it's going to be Derek Ryan, who finished 7th on the team in scoring this year, which maybe not a lot of people expected. He tied his career high in points with 38, and Calgary's 4th line has been by far their best line down the stretch, not even close. Ryan, Mangiapane, and Hathaway have really combined everything that Calgary needs down the stretch. And if that line can continue to produce, I've seen a lot of people talking about Calgary's depth scoring, but it's excellent because of that line.
I think this team lives and dies, Calgary that is, with their goaltenders. But like you, I don't have David Riddick or Mike Smith being the difference maker. I have Matthew Tkachuk. We've been talking a lot about Tkachuk. His brother sits right here, but
love him. Yeah. Great guy. Great
But
hair.
I think that Matthew Tkachuk is exactly the player that thrives in the playoffs. He's a pain in the ass. If he's not on my team, I hate his guts, but he's in the West, so I genuinely like him. But I think that Matthew Tkachuk has everything that he needs that will go into a perfect playoff player. He's a player that works harder than just about anyone on the ice.
Yep.
He's a pain in the ass. He knows how to get under people's skin, and he can produce offensively.
Yep.
That's at least my pick there for Matthew Tkachuk.
I have James Neal.
Interesting.
He has not, in his playoff performance, he's never been outstanding, but he's never been awful. But the last 2 seasons, he has been to the Cup Finals.
Twice, yeah.
So, that's what I meant by last 2.
Are you using the Taylor Hall logic?
I'm using the logic that he can bring some veteran presence to a team with, they have some older people, but they also have some Goudreau, some Bennett's that need some help. So I think that just his presence alone will be a help. And on the third line, he won't be facing the meat and bread of the teams.
Hold on a second.
He's been there all year.
What about Sam Bennett needs help?
How young is he?
He's 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
There it is.
Okay, sure. Well,
that's my. I'm not saying he needs help scoring. I'm
Right.
saying that
Well, he does,
playoffs are a different issue.
Yeah, I mean, with Sam Bennett, I think Bennett is a lot more of a sure thing than Johnny Gaudreau is in the playoffs. Bennett was probably Calgary's best player on the playoffs 2 years ago because Bennett and Michael Furland both had very similar playoffs in terms of how well they played and they were able to take over games. Because Bennett and Monahan were probably the only two Flames that showed up consistently in the 2017 playoffs. Everybody else was terrible, and so I think that's another player to watch, really.
And who do you have for Colorado?
Colorado? Oh, boy. Who do I have for Colorado? I had Philip Grubauer, obviously. Philip Grubauer. Obviously. He's going to be the guy who's going to keep them in this series because Colorado's depth up front is very bad.
Yep.
Their depth on defense is it's okay. But their goaltender, he's been very good down the stretch. I think he's 7-0-2 in his last 9. So that could do it because Calgary sometimes plays badly when they run into a hot goalie.
I think most teams play badly when
Well,
they run into a hot goalie. I think
yeah.
that's what tends to happen. I have Gabriel Landeskog,
Same here.
one of the most important players on this team, one of the only 3 decent players, in my opinion. And Rantanen back in this one, but not 100%. McKinnon, a fantastic player, but I think that was too obvious of a shout. I think Captain Gabriel Landeskog brings more than just his on-ice play. I think he's a great defensive player. I think he knows how to transition the puck well.
Yep.
I think he will be the reason that Colorado will win the one game they do in the series because I see this one going 5.
I don't have them winning a game.
Yeah. I could see that.
You see a sweep?
I could see it. I have them winning in 5. I have Calgary winning in 5.
Yeah.
Just because.
Every game that I have going, every series I have going 5, I won't be shocked if it's a sweep.
Yeah, Calgary just has so much depth at every position. Like really, that's really their best trait. I mean, they have 10 NHL defensemen currently on the roster. They have 15 NHL forwards who have all played a game and scored a goal this year. So I have a really hard time believing anybody who picks against this team in this series, and I have them going all the way personally.
Winning or
I have them go. Well, I think they're going to play Carolina in the finals, which will be a really interesting final because I mean that's a rematch of the summer, that trade that they made, and I do see Calgary winning that series.
do you want Don Cherry to have an aneurysm?
I do.
Yeah, I think it'll be very funny.
I tweeted that the night he said the thing about the jerks. I hope Carolina does.
I think it'll be very
make
funny.
the Stanley Cup playoffs really quickly. Marshall, your Stanley Cup final. Let's skip right there. Your finals.
Tampa, 6 games over Nashville.
Okay. I have Nashville, 6 games over Washington.
Wow. Yeah, I have Calgary and I think 5 or 6 over Carolina.
Why don't we really quickly touch on the draft lottery? Let Marshall be happy for once on this podcast, and then we'll call it a day. We've been going for quite some time.
Yeah.
So Taylor Hall wins the draft lottery.
Thank you, Taylor.
I think 7 out. I think the stat is 7.
6 out of 10.
But if you count the year he was,
No, it's 6 if you count the year that he won.
It's 5 if you don't, 6 if you do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well then, I'm wrong. 6 if you do. That team that he's been on has won the draft lottery.
It's literally an example of 60% of the time it works every time.
60% of the time it works every time.
And I am so happy for him. I'm happy for that New York, for the first time since the expansion,
1966.
Getting a top 3 pick, and Chicago, because they need all the help in the world, they'll get another one.
That leaves 2 teams who have never selected in the top 3 of an NHL entry draft, Calgary and Vegas.
No.
I don't feel bad for Calgary. They won a
Vegas
cup.
also shouldn't count.
Yeah. Well,
But I'm just so happy that because the trade itself, yes, not great to give up a first-round pick. It was technically protected because they had the choice of last year or this year.
Yeah.
It just wasn't protected as much as the Duchesne second Duchesne first pick is. But I'm happy that taking Brady is
absolutely
is cemented as the right choice. Because if Colorado got first or second, there would have been a lot of second guessing.
I don't think it would have been the right choice if it went there. But I also don't think that it was the right choice in the moment.
I do.
I think name and who above Brady has been better than Brady this year.
Well, no. But it's not because of the player you got. I think Brady Tkachuk is a player, man.
Yeah.
I think he's very much like his brother Matthew, who I rate very highly. But look at what has happened this year in Ottawa. It hasn't been a good year, and I think you can say whatever you want regarding how dark it would have been and how much of an idiot Eugene Melnyk is. We've talked ourselves to death about how much of an asshole he is, but I think that part of the blackness, and I don't think this season could have been much darker than a black hole in Ottawa,
which we can now finally see.
Yes.
No, that's
And the black hole is shaped like the Senators' third logo. It's
Well, the Ottawa
and the
logo.
number of
Yeah.
cups they have.
yeah, it's true.
You were saying?
But I think that part of the reason why it's been so dark in Ottawa is the simple fact that they don't have a pick this year. There was nothing to look forward to this
Yeah.
season. It was a complete waste of a year.
Yeah.
It
and
only
the
got
fact
darker.
that Dorian on the radio yesterday.
Before the draft lottery said, yeah.
Well, wait, what are you gonna
I
say?
missed this.
He said Dorian yesterday before the draft lottery said everything's behind us.
Oh,
the
yeah,
worst.
no.
Yeah.
Well, no, I was going to bring up that he expects them to be competing, not making a playoff spot next year, in 2 years in the playoffs, and 3 years winning series.
I mean, it depends on a lot of things.
It depends entirely on if Tkachuk, Shabbat, Colin White, and Alex Formanton
Take another step or two each.
Well, Formanton needs to take 2 steps.
Yeah.
The rest of them can take one. Tkachuk can take 1 step, and they'll
Yeah.
be competing. Shabbat, same. The
Yeah.
rest of them need to step it up big
Yeah.
time, and they need to get a goalie for once
Yeah.
that is not every other year.
Yeah, the Senators have question marks, to say the least. I
They
think
have question marks everywhere
Yeah.
except for Brady Tkachuk.
I think Brady Tkachuk, I think that was always the correct move, because for me, Brady Tkachuk is as close to a sure thing as was possible in that draft. And I would have taken him number 2 overall if I was who picked second if I was Carolina.
Yeah.
I liked him better than Svechnikov, simply because I've seen a lot of his brother, and his brother is a star, and Brady is going to be the same thing, if you ask me, because I've seen him in Ottawa, and he's just terrific.
Am I convinced 8 years from now Shabbat and Tkachuk will be on Ottawa?
And you never know.
No, I'm not. However, misery loves company,
Yeah.
so I look forward to Toronto losing to Boston.
Oh,
We'll go drinking together when they do.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
that's good.
Okay, guys. Why don't
Wrap it
we
up.
call this a show? We've been talking for quite some time, and I'm pretty damn excited to watch some playoff hockey.
In an hour.
For Declan DeBarb, Mike Gould, thanks
Hello.
for coming on once again, buddy.
Yep.
Ian, feel better.
Ian, feel better, buddy.
Rip.
We're missing you. And Marshall, have a good night, guys.
Follow your hosts on Twitter at DeBarp14, at Ian_Blumenthal, and at Marshall Healy. Don't forget to follow the podcast at Real Good Procast.